Is it possible that the pain in our lives could have a purpose? Here's a little story about that. Hi, welcome to 5-Minute Fika, where we find the time to do a little self-care of the soul by thinking about true and beautiful things. Once upon a time, there was a potter who was skilled and very kind. He worked in a one-room workshop where the stones in the walls fit this way and that like stained glass. Rough wooden shelves ran along them, bearing the weight of plates and cups, bowls and pots, tall, thin vases and short, fat milk pitchers. Some were the color of clay or shone under glaze. Others were painted green or yellow or china blue. In the center of the room stood his potter's wheel. It was sturdy and strong, and when he spun from atop his weathered wooden stool, he sang. From the first tangerine streaks of sunrise to the rose gold glow of sunset, the potter took shapeless lumps of clay and made them beautiful. One day, he set a new lump of clay on his wheel and began to spin. The sun was just peeking through the trees, gilding the leaves and spreading patches of light warm and thick across the floor. The potter's voice rang clear like the morning, and under his hands the spinning clay took form. The first thing the little lump of clay felt was the warmth of the potter's hands. Then she felt the warmth in the potter's voice. Then, as she was stretched and pulled, hollowed and folded, she felt the certainty of her own purpose. What exactly that purpose was, she wasn't sure, but she knew she had one. The potter wouldn't be shaping her with such care if she didn't. For several moments, the little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, rested happily in the morning and the song and the potter's purpose for her. As she spun, she felt the curve of a lip taking shape. Was that a handle? Maybe a spout. Her base spread wide and round, and one well-placed nudge from the potter's fingers striped her from top to bottom. It was dizzying and glorious all at once. Suddenly, as the potter's thumb teased the lip out further, the clay felt a sharp pain. Ouch! The potter's fingers were gentle, but when they ran across the spot a second time, the pain stabbed again. When it happened a third time, the little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, cried out. "Stop!" she said. "Stop, it hurts!" The potter paused his song and his wheel. "It's just a small bump," he said. "I can work it away if you let me." The lump of clay forgot all about the morning and the song and the potter's purpose. All she could feel was the pain, and it was too much. "No," she said, "please, just stop." The potter looked down at her for a very long time. The little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, desperately hoped he wouldn't touch the bump again. Finally, the potter sighed, took her off the wheel, and set her high up on a shelf. Soon after, he left the stone workshop, shutting the door behind him with a click. Morning slid into afternoon, and afternoon stretched into the long shadows of evening. The potter did not return to spin or sing. The next day, when the glittering navy of night faded into a sky like melting sherbet, the potter sat again on his weathered wooden stool. He set a new lump of clay on his wheel and began to spin. His voice rang clear like the morning, and under his hands the spinning clay took form. The little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, watched the potter from her perch high above. She saw the new lump of clay become a sugar bowl. The next day she watched the potter shape a matching creamer. The day after that came a wide serving dish, then a water pitcher, then a vase for flowers, then a bowl the potter painted red and yellow and china blue. At first, all the little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, could think about was the pain. The potter's kind and gentle hands had felt harsh when they brushed against the bump, and the lump of clay never wanted to feel that way again. But as day after day went by and she watched the potter take shapeless lumps of clay and make them beautiful, she found she missed the warmth of the potter's touch. She missed being the purpose for the potter's song, and she missed feeling the certainty of her own purpose. So many times she nearly called out to the potter to say she'd changed her mind, but then she remembered her pain. She nursed her hurtful little bump and kept silent. One morning, when the sun was just peeking through the trees and patches of light were spreading warm and thick across the floor, the little lump of clay, which was almost a something but not quite, awoke to a horrible realization. She had hardened. Every day she'd sat high upon the shelf, had stolen a sliver of the softness she once knew, and now all of her malleability had left her. Her fate crashed over her like a wave. She would never become what she was meant to be. She would always, always be just almost a something, but not quite. That pain was stronger than the bump, and she cried out in despair. "Potter!" she wailed. "Potter, I'm sorry." The potter paused his song and his wheel and looked up. Words tumbled from the little lump of clay like a rolling stream. "I thought I could come back. I thought someday you would finish what you started and I'd be the thing you wanted me to be. I'd be like the others. Beautiful. But now it's too late. Now I'll never be anything but this ugly, useless, hardened nothing. It felt as if her soul had been ground into 1,000 tiny pieces. Potter said nothing, and for a few moments the room was still, sorrow hanging heavy in the air. Then he stood, picked up the jug he'd been shaping on the wheel, and set it on a bench nearby. He reached up, 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 until the clay, which was almost a something but not quite, felt herself get lifted off the high shelf. In a flash, she was back on the wheel and spinning. The first thing she felt was the warmth. The potter's hands and the potter's voice moved as one, stretching and pulling, hollowing and folding, ringing clear like the morning. The potter's thumb brushed over the bump and it stung, but not as badly as before. The clay stayed silent, for the pain was no longer too high a price to pay for resting happily in the potter's purpose for her. It was dizzying and glorious all at once. Soon, as the potter promised, the bump was worked away. The curve of a lip started taking shape, and her base spread wide and round. All of a sudden, the little lump of clay realized she was soft again, and malleable. The hardness she thought would define her forever was melting away. No, it was gone. But how? She looked up and saw that she'd been made wet again, wet by the potter's own tears. The little cup, for it was a cup she was always meant to be, was finished by the time the rose-gold glow of sunset gilded the leaves of the trees. The potter painted her, glazed her, and took her from the workshop into his very own home. Every day the little cup was filled with something warm and nourishing, and held in the hands of a potter who was skilled and very kind. It was her purpose. It always had been. She was beautiful. It is good to be alive. You are not in this alone, and you, my darling, are spectacular. Have a great day.